Okay, guys. Okay. Today's video is going to be talking to you guys about the timeline for writing my book, The Odyssey Effect, How Homer's Epic Poem Shaped the World. I've gotten a lot of questions. I even did a video that's like, I don't know what order everything's coming out in, but I film everything within like 2 or 3 days. But I had a big Q&A on my personal Instagram account, like my private Instagram account, which is called MoAn Inc. I think I'm hilarious. I don't think anybody else thinks of them as funny. But anyways, on that account, I've been having loads of questions come in about the timeline and about writing this book. And I even answered one that was like, how did you think of the idea of the book? And so I wanted to upload a video just kind of explaining the process of the book. And also, I wanted the excuse to show you the book. Yay! I finally got a copy in the mail and it is so cute. I have told you guys that the book is basically going to be a smaller coffee table book. It's really the perfect size for like your bedside table or any smaller table that you have in like a living room or whatever it happens to be. Like it's so cute. I am obsessed with it. Also, let me show you what the pages look like because they're really pretty. Ta-da! Also, here's kind of another example of what the illustrations look like. And there are lots of like little ones. As you can see, we have like a little pot here. So it is designed to be like cutesy. I've frequently said it's not a reference book. You can't quote this when it comes to academic papers or whatever. It's a cutesy introduction to looking at the Odyssey from its inception to today and how retellings and readaptations have changed. So today's video is going to be walking you through the process of actually creating this book, how it came to me, all of that kind of stuff, just so that you have it in one place to understand the timeline of things, of how I was working and how this whole thing came about. I think a number of you want to be authors, and so because of that, maybe sharing the story is going to help so that you can kind of understand the timelines of that. With that being said, let's roll into the story. This book is not my idea. It was not my idea. It was not something that I sat on for many, many years and I thought, God, this would be amazing. I didn't have to shop it around. I don't have an agent. In fact, just generally speaking, when it comes to my career, I do not have an agent. I do not have a manager. I do not have a publicist. It is just me. It is just a one-woman team. And when it comes to this book, this is something that came to me. So the first email that I got from the publishers, who are Quarto, was in, I think, December of 2024. So we've got to like turn back the clock quite a bit. And when this email came through, what everybody needs to bear in mind is that when my channel hit, I think like 20,000 followers, I was getting loads of book deal offers. Now, also what is important to understand is that year I was put on a list of 30 under 30 historians. And since that list came out, 20K subscribers kind of came at the same time. And so therefore I was getting loads of book deal offers because people were assuming, okay, great, if you're on this list and you do ancient history, we would love to publish a book by you. And the majority of these requests, or not requests, but I guess messages of interest, I should say, were people asking me if I had a book idea. And if I did, they would be happy to publish it for me. Now, I got offers from some really, really good publishers, but the other offers that I was getting were from like the top publishers. Like we're talking like the big 5 were coming to me, but they were giving me a different kind of pitch. So instead, what they were coming to me for was, this is our catalog. We're missing a book in ancient history about X. Would you be happy to write it? Now, this is something that commonly happens. I've explained this in another video. It commonly happens, right? So I've spoken to a number of different historians on MoAn Inc, my main channel, and they've said, oh, this book idea isn't mine. It came from the publishers. And it's because they have a library. They want somebody to fill it, but they also, like a lot of publishers now, are looking at people who are online because they have a built-in audience that they can sell the book to, blah, 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 whatever. So this means that by the time Quarto emailed me, I think I had like 9 offers. I want to say 8 or 9 book offers. I don't remember if Quarto's was the 9th or if Quarto's was the 8th. It was something like that, but either way. So I had loads. It wasn't quite double digits, but I was surprised by how many publishers and how many big publishers had come my way. But I did not see myself in any of these ideas. And when people were asking me if I had a book idea, as you guys know, the answer was no. For years on MoAn Inc, I had always told you guys that I didn't see myself writing a book. I definitely didn't see myself writing a retelling, but I also don't feel like I have anything new to say. And therefore I thought, why would I write a book? And why would anybody read said book? So this means that when Quarto emailed me, I was so pitched out that I ignored them. I did not reply to the first email that Quarto gave me. And I think the subject of that was like Odyssey retelling book proposal. Like it was something like that. And I was like, oh no. And I just ignored them. And then in the new year, at the start of 2025, I got another follow-up email, which was kind of like, I don't know if you saw this previous email, blah, blah. And I don't think I replied to that one. And then they emailed me again, or this was part of the same email. I'm not exactly sure. I could have checked, but still. They emailed me then basically asking if I could just get on a Zoom call and talk to them. So my contact at Quarto was Erin. And when she suggested getting on a Zoom call, I was like, fine, I'm willing to hear what this woman has to say. She's also the only person that had actually asked for a Zoom call. Everybody else wanted to do things by email, or they had wanted to meet in person. I had met a bunch of publishers like going into the publishing houses here in London. And this was the first person that was like, just get on a Zoom call. It'll be super quick in the afternoon. And I was like, fine, that's like super low stakes, no problem. And when I got on this Zoom call, this was at the beginning of February, I think, or maybe the middle of February. And I remember getting on that call, and Erin was one of the kindest people I've ever spoken to. Like, she was so nice. She was so excited. And she told me of the idea that Quarto had, which at the time, the book was called The Odyssey of the Odyssey. She said that the idea was to track the Odyssey's inception, well, from its inception through history, to kind of look at how revisitings have changed and how the characters and how the story has changed, or how it's gone back to the original, so to speak. And I was like, okay, that sounds fine, sounds nice. And she then started saying, we need you on this book because, and she listed off, I mean, she was referencing my videos. She was like, I loved this joke that you told. I like this, blah, blah, blah. Like, as a team, we love your voice and all of these sorts of things. It was the first time I'd gone into a meeting, the first time I had spoken to anybody who actually knew who I was. And when they were offering me a book, she was like, no, this is your book. And a big part of this story that I really highlight to people when I meet them in person is that this book should have realistically gone to somebody else, because I did not reply to the first email. I then wasn't replying super quickly to the second or third email. I get on a call with her. We're crunching into time, right? Like, we are moving forward, and I'm kind of like, I don't really know. It should have realistically gone to someone else, and it didn't. Quarto wanted me to write this book, and they made it very, very apparent that it was my book. And because of that, it made me believe in them more. And so after that Zoom call, whenever it was in February, I asked them to send over the contract. So they had to write it up, send over the contract. And also I had like more questions about voice on the book and all of those sorts of things. So we then spend the next few months going back and forth, negotiating the contract, because I also was like reading this thing really closely to make sure I knew exactly what they wanted of me. But also we were going back and forth with the voice. We were going back and forth with, what they want. They also, like on Erin's end, she had to present it to a team of people, and they also had to agree on the voice. Like, there was a lot of people involved in this. So I only ended up signing the contract and being happy with it, and also Quarto being happy with me working on the book, as, with all of like my questions and being like, who are you? And blah, blah. They were only happy, and I was only happy in May. So at the end of May, I signed the contract, and that was it. We're locked in. However, I do want to make this clear. I read that contract to death. And something that I love about Quarto, and I will always love about Quarto, is in those months when we were talking and we were negotiating and all of these sorts of things, they were so vocal about everything that they were going to require of me. The deadlines for my book, which I knew the deadline for the first manuscript was going to be September 1st. I knew that from February of 2025, right? So I knew that very early on. And it was, if you come onto this book, you need to submit the first manuscript by this date. Like, there is no wiggle room here whatsoever. But that was made very apparent to me. I chose, because I have always said this, something I always say to people, I do not work on things before I sign a contract. I have been taken advantage of in many other situations. Not the point. Quarto and I, when we were talking to one another, I wasn't working on the book because of this. I always tell people, don't work on anything before you have a contract signed, right? It needs to be in front of you. It needs to be signed, and you need to be happy with it. So when I was going through Quarto's contract, they were incredible. Anytime I had a question about anything, they were answering it. Anytime I was like, is it possible that we could add this in, or we could change this? The answer was yes. Like, they were very, very good with all of this. And in case you don't know, when you sign a book contract, you know the deadlines. They tell you the deadlines. They also tell you how many copies you're going to be getting. They tell you everything that you need to know, even the word count. My contract was 40,000 words, 45 with the bibliography, right? So that was made very apparent. It was like, you do not write less, you do not write more, this is it. So when I actually started working on the book, I knew everything that was required of me. Corto, again, were fantastic communicators, and they have been this entire process. So because I only signed the contract at the end of May, and we're talking like one of the last days of May, I had like a week of like just staring at a wall being like, oh my God, I signed a contract where I have to write 40,000 words by September. What the hell? What the hell have I done? Now, this is where I think, you have to be a really specific kind of person in order to do this, but also you have to have a specific amount of privilege. And by privilege, I do not mean, money-wise or anything like that, because my book deal was nice, okay? So that was fine. We were very comfortable in that sense. And it was because it was such a time, allotted thing. I mean privilege in the sense of I don't have any dependents. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have, anybody else that I have to feed. I just have to look out for myself. At the time, I don't even have a relationship. So I'm like, I don't need to give anybody else attention. The only thing that requires my attention right now is this book. I do not think that anybody who has any of the things I just mentioned could do this. Even if you had a dog, I don't think that you could have done this. If you do this, I want you to write a book on how you did it. And so when I was freaking out in this 1 week, I basically decided that the way this was going to work in order for me to be able to write 40,000 words was that I needed to spend a month reading, I needed to spend a month writing, and I needed to spend a month editing. And this is because I am not someone who can write things perfectly the first time. I don't know why my brain just cannot do it. And so I was like, this is the only way it's going to happen. Now, of course, I didn't sign the contract not knowing anything about this topic. When they pitched The Odyssey of the Odyssey, which again was the original title of the book, I knew I could realistically do it in a summer because I knew so much about the topic. I just had to go and double check my sources. I had to see if there was anything I didn't know about. All of these sorts of things. That's what I spent June doing. So I think I uploaded my last video at the beginning of June, like my last YouTube video at the beginning of June on MoAn Inc. And then I just disappeared because I was reading. And then at the end of June, I actually did something really stupid. At the end of June, I fucked off to the mountains to go to Muay Thai camp. So I disappeared for 10 days where I did nothing. I spent all month reading. And then at the end of June, I was like, I'm gonna go to the deeply rural mountains of Spain. I had no phone service. There was no Wi-Fi. I was woken up by a rooster every single morning. To be fair, it advertised rural on the website and I was like, sick, let's go. And I just didn't understand what rural meant until I got there. And one guy was sleeping in a tent, right? Elias was sleeping in a tent outside because there weren't enough rooms where we were staying. I loved it. It was amazing. Would recommend it. It was so hard. But aside from that, it was an incredible experience. So I didn't do any work for 10 days. I then came back to London. I was refreshed. I just knuckled down and I decided to write the book from top to bottom. Just literally started with the introduction and wrote the whole way through. And something that I had to do before this was not only understand the word count, but also be able to break down how many words each chapter would be. So I was really hyper aware as I was writing the book top to bottom. When I would hit my limit of a chapter, I would then just sort of do a line. I would keep writing that chapter so that I knew where the word count was. And then I would move on to the next chapter. I would finish the thought and then move on to the next chapter and so on and so forth. So there are lots of things that are cut from the chapters because it's only 40,000 words that just it was just too big of a topic. So I just wrote for the entire month of July. And then at the end of July to August 3rd, I think, I was in Cyprus for 4 days. One of my best friends from my childhood just randomly sent me a voice note the week before and was like, hey, no stress, but I'm gonna get married next week. You should totally come. And I was like, well, okay, I can't miss this. So I ended up in Cyprus and I couldn't work on my book during her impromptu wedding. Don't worry, guys. We know the husband. It wasn't a random husband. They've been going out for 2-3 years at that point anyways. I can't remember, but either way, he's been around for a very long time. It was just more so they just decided, let's get married now. So obviously I've been friends with her since I was 12. I showed up for the wedding. And then whilst I'm there, I can't work on anything, but it was a really good break because then when I got back, I just had to make it readable. That was it. All I focused on was making it readable. So that by the time I handed in the first manuscript, it was at least in a condition where my editor wasn't like, I'm gonna off myself right now because this is horrendous. So I handed it in, and the issue that happens here, unfortunately, is my editor for the project got ill. So we were then delayed in getting the edits back. So I didn't have a lot of time with the edits because she didn't have a lot of time working on it. Something you should know is that all throughout August, we had a very codependent relationship, because it was like every week or so I was getting an email from her, and this continued into September, sort of being like, oh, you should include this and make sure this is included. Remember, this is not my idea. This is an idea that the publishers had. And so therefore they had a very, very strong idea of what the book should look like and what it should include. So constantly there are a lot of things that I wanted to put in the book that then they were like, nope, cut this because you need to include Percy Jackson, or you need to include the Smurfs. Actually, they told me I had to include the Smurfs. I didn't know that the Smurfs had even done an Odyssey rendition. So things like that I had to include. And me and Flannery had been speaking about this. My editor had been speaking about this constantly. And again, I signed a contract knowing this. Like, this is not them doing anything weird. This is exactly what I agreed to, and I was happy to agree to it. So then Flannery unfortunately gets ill. My editor gets ill. So then by the time I got the first edit back, it was like September 18th, 19th or something. And so I hadn't worked on it in that time period because Flannery had it, and then she ended up reading it, and then she came back with all of her edits. I had about 5 days with the edits at that point, I think, 5 or 6 days, no more than a week of making all of these edits, sending it back to her. And when I sent it back to her for the second time, I also then sent it to my friend Unexpected Learning Journey, and well, Unexpected Learning Journey on Instagram. Her name's Lorna. But I sent it to Lorna as well as sending it to Laura, who is Greek Myth Comics, because I really wanted them to just check the classic side of things, because I knew that Flannery, my editor, couldn't do that. So they went into it. They then told me if they spotted anything really obvious that was, not right on the surface. So we then had all those edits to make the second round, which is why I have a video explaining, I don't know how some things weren't changed, because this was the time period that things were happening. Anyways, this is then the second edit. And once I got it back and I made all those changes and I added all the changes that Lorna and that Laura made, that was it. That was it. So that was the beginning of October. I think it was October 8th, I think. Maybe? I'm maybe making this up, but it wasn't past October 10th. And that was all the time that I had with the book. That was it. It was from right at the end of May to right at the beginning of October, where I had access to this book, and then I handed it off because it is an illustrated book and I knew the timelines, and the illustrator needs to have an equal amount of time with the words that I wrote in order to make it visually appealing. So then it goes off to the team and they handle it with the illustrator. Fast forward to January, where I know that this is where I'm going to get my final check. So if I spot any last minute typos, this is where I can make that change. And this was delayed. So I was supposed to get it, I think, at the beginning of Jan and have a few weeks with it. And instead there was an issue. I'm not even really sure what the issue was with the illustrator. Didn't ask any questions. I just know it got delayed on the illustrator's end because of some sort of system failure or rebuilding. I don't know. But regardless, I only got it for then a week. And once it's passed on to this period, it then comes with a different person. There's a different person on the team who's handling this. And so I'm then emailing this new person, and she's like, oh, here's the book, just check it. Obviously you can't make any massive changes, but if there are any typos, just let us know and we'll do them. And I was like, cool. And then I opened the book and I didn't have any time to check the typos because, as it turns out, I did not understand something that they had been saying from day one. So there's a part of these illustrated books which is called a sidebar. And me stupidly assumed it was just something that would appear on the side of the page. I should have asked exactly what a sidebar is because I had multiple options and times where I could have. I remember so many instances where I'm on the phone with Flannery, my editor, or I'm emailing somebody else on the team and they were like, oh, we'll do this for the sidebar. Are you sure what a sidebar is? And I kept saying, yes. Turns out I wasn't. This is totally my fault. So when I got this book and suddenly I understood what a sidebar was, I had to rewrite most of those sidebars. So what a sidebar is in Corto's world, I don't know if this expands out into the rest of the publishing world, but in Corto's world, it is basically a paragraph or a chunk of what you're writing that can be isolated and it can be moved because this is illustrated. So it'll have its own illustrations, its own sort of color, and it stands out in the chapter. Let me show you an example because these sidebars, again, they're not on the side of the page. Okay, here's one. So This, for example, is a sidebar. This is a chunk of text that I wrote that they have taken out of its context within the writing of the chapter, and they've moved it to a place where the illustrations, like, it needed something fun, right? So they're like, okay, cool, we'll just sidebar it here. And it looks drastically different from a regular page, right? So that's what a sidebar is. As it turns out, all of the sidebars, because I had written everything in order, they were supposed to read along the text. And now that they were moved, the book didn't read linearly. So it meant that I had to message this new person who like doesn't know me. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm gonna sound like really bitchy right now. I know you said I can't make any edits, but the book doesn't read linearly. I need to correct these. And this is how as well I got those last little typos that kind of missed the mark, because I spent 1 week having to rewrite sections of my book in order to make sure that they made sense. And also I then had to change, because sometimes, you know, when the paragraphs, I have these sections in the book, and sometimes the sections don't lead into the other section neatly. And therefore I had to rewrite the end of other sections, the start of new sections, to make it all make sense. So that's what I was doing for that week. Okay, I wasn't checking typos. I was like, I need to make sure this reads and this makes sense because people are gonna think I'm so stupid and blah, blah. And Corto, again, were amazing because you shouldn't be allowed to do that at this point. At this point, it's all been formulated. And what they let me do is they were like, well, obviously this is a problem. Thank you so much for flagging it for us and for acknowledging this. So we're going to have to kind of move things around. And they had to, like, I mean, it was like a real undertaking, and I'm really thankful for them that they allowed me to do that. So that was what happened in January. And I remember it was like 5 or 6 days of me just like chained to my kitchen table. And then after that point in Jan, that's it. That is, now it's a physical book. And now the job is to sell the physical book. But the reason I wanted to kind of tell you guys the timeline is because obviously I kind of disappeared from YouTube for like 6 months. And the reason is because also right after I handed in that second manuscript at the beginning of October, I then got a job in Switzerland lecturing. So then I sort of disappeared to Switzerland and I did that. So I made up some extra money that way. And then I could finally return back to YouTube and regular programming. But the purpose of me telling you all of this as well is because not all books are an idea that you think of that you kind of sit with for years and that you have the manuscript for and you've got to shop around and you've got to do all of that. Sometimes they just come to you. And when they come to you, your job is to read that contract so closely. I did, and I was working with the most incredible publishers who listen to me every step of the way. They are publishers who continue, now that the book is coming out, to listen to me anytime I'm like, I have this idea, like, what about we do this, blah, blah. They are so creative with their marketing campaigns. I mean, they're just, like, I couldn't have asked for a better publisher with regards to such a wonderfully stressful instance, you know? And I do really say that in a really loving way, because I will always look back at this period as this is the fastest I've ever worked. This is the most stressed I've ever been up until this point. But I couldn't have picked a better team. Really, I couldn't have picked a better team. And I'm so happy, and I will forever be so blessed to have been on this journey. So thank you guys so much for all of your support. And I hope this kind of made the last year make a little bit more sense of where I've been and what things have been going on behind the scenes. And yeah, I don't have an end for this video, so this is it.